Lark and Silas Beaumont were born into a life that looked perfect from the outside. Prestigious parents, a mansion in Willow Grove Hills, and a flawless public image. But behind the spotless curtains and rehearsed family smiles, a nightmare was unfolding. One that ended with their father's brutal murder, their sister's long-buried death, and a truth so dark, it shattered everything the town thought it knew about the Beaumonts. In the serene and well-manicured neighborhood of Willow Grove Hills, the Beaumont family stood as the golden standard of suburban success. Their two-story colonial-style mansion, adorned with white shutters and a wraparound porch, was the envy of many. Passers-by often slowed their cars just to admire the neatly trimmed hedges, the blooming hydrangeas, and the polished black car parked in the driveway. Every Sunday, the entire family would emerge from their home like a scene out of a lifestyle magazine. Dr. Elliot Beaumont in his tailored navy blazer, Marina in a modest pastel dress, and the teenage twins, Lark and Silas, walking in perfect step behind them. They never missed a church service, community fundraiser, or school event. To everyone who knew them, or thought they did, the Beaumonts were flawless. Dr. Elliot was a highly respected heart surgeon with a long list of accolades, and patients who swore he had saved their lives. His reputation extended far beyond the hospital walls. He often spoke at medical conferences and gave interviews on health panels. His wife, Marina, ran a successful blog titled As You're Living Gracefully, where she shared parenting tips, meal plans, and home decor ideas. Her content radiated warmth and balance, portraying her as the loving wife and nurturing mother everyone wished they had. Their blog followers and social media fans often commented on how lucky their children must be to grow up in such an organized, positive household. Lark and Silas, both 16, were equally impressive. Lark was a competitive swimmer with dreams of going to Stanford. Silas, on the other hand, leaned into music and technology, having won 2 regional science fairs by the age of 14. Teachers praised their discipline, neighbors commented on their politeness, and friends admired their achievements. But behind the closed doors of the Beaumont home, a very different reality existed, one that no camera blog or polished Sunday outfit could reveal. Despite their seemingly idyllic life, there were warning signs that few noticed. The twins never had friends over, despite their popularity at school. When asked, they always gave the same answer. Their house was too busy, or their parents didn't like mess. Teachers occasionally mentioned how the twins seemed tired or distracted during class, but those concerns were always brushed aside. The family's home remained off limits, even to close neighbors. Not once had anyone stepped inside for a holiday party or casual dinner. When one neighbor, Mrs. Halley, dropped off cookies around Christmas time, she noticed that Elliot opened the door only a crack, thanked her abruptly, and closed it without inviting her in. She joked later that it was like delivering cookies to a haunted house, beautiful on the outside, but strangely cold. As the months passed, more signs emerged. Lark suddenly quit the swim team, citing exhaustion. Silas stopped attending robotics club meetings. Their teachers noticed more frequent absences, and their bright personalities dulled. A once smiling Lark now walked through the school halls with her eyes down, and Silas developed a habit of rubbing his temples as if battling constant migraines. Still, when confronted, they gave rehearsed-sounding responses, always praising their parents, always maintaining the illusion. The final crack appeared one gray November afternoon when a school counselor, Mrs. Dent, attempted to call Marina about Silas missing several days of school. The call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, she tried Elliot's work number. A hospital staff member said he hadn't been in for days but didn't know why. When Silas returned the next week, he had visible bruises on his arm and a large sweater covering what looked like marks on his neck. Mrs. Dent submitted a report to Child Protective Services, but when agents visited the home, Marina welcomed them with warm tea and a practiced smile. The twins said nothing unusual was going on. The case was closed within days. For a while, everything went quiet again. The Beaumonts continued posting curated photos and smiling at church. But the truth was bubbling under the surface. The house had become a pressure cooker of secrets, trauma, and suppressed emotions. And one night, all of it would violently explode, shattering the illusion of perfection the Beaumonts had fought so hard to maintain. The storm rolled into Willow Grove Hills late that night, thunder echoing through the sky as rain hammered down on rooftops and flooded the empty streets. At 1:42 a.m., a 911 call pierced the silence. The operator couldn't make out much through the static and muffled sounds. Just a woman's panicked breathing and the words, "He's not moving," repeated over and over. The call ended abruptly. Within minutes, police cruisers were dispatched to the address that came up on their systems, 27 Oak Ridge Lane, the home of the Beaumont family. When officers arrived, they found the grand house eerily still. Rain dripped from the gutters, and one of the porch lights flickered weakly. The front door was ajar, swaying slightly in the wind. Inside, the scene was far removed from the perfect home that everyone in the neighborhood imagined. Just beyond the foyer, Elliot Beaumont lay crumpled at the base of the staircase. Blood pooled around his head, soaking into the white marble floor and splattering the lower steps. A decorative vase was shattered nearby, and shards of porcelain glittered like glass in the hallway light. Marina Beaumont was found sitting halfway up the staircase, barefoot, her pale blue nightgown clinging to her soaked skin. Her hands trembled violently as she stared ahead in shock, eyes fixed on her husband's lifeless body. She wasn't crying, nor did she speak. When the officers asked her what had happened, she didn't respond. She looked through them as if they weren't there. Paramedics confirmed what was already obvious. Elliot was dead. The cause was blunt force trauma to the skull. There were no defensive wounds on him, no sign that he had struggled. Strangely, the house showed no signs of forced entry. All windows were locked from the inside, and there was no damage to any of the doors. The living room appeared undisturbed. Electronics, wallets, and jewelry were untouched. No drawers were ransacked, and there were no muddy footprints leading in or out. It didn't look like a break-in. It looked personal. As officers moved deeper into the home, they noticed inconsistencies that raised immediate suspicion. In Elliot's study, the bookshelves had been partially emptied, and one of the built-in drawers was pried open. Inside, they found fragments of torn photographs, an old camcorder with its memory card missing, and a stack of unfiled medical prescriptions, all written under Elliot's name. Curiously, several of the prescriptions were for drugs not commonly found in household medicine cabinets, sedatives typically used in psychiatric facilities. They also found a wall-mounted security camera near the front entrance. It had been smashed deliberately. Officers collected the remains and searched for a hard drive, but it had been pulled from its casing and was missing entirely. A small patch of floorboard near the back entrance had been pried loose, exposing an empty cavity underneath. Whatever had been hidden there had been removed in a hurry. The most chilling detail wasn't the blood or the signs of tampering. It was the absence of Lark and Silas. Their bedrooms were empty, beds unslept in. Their phones were found on their nightstands, both powered off. Lark's window was slightly open, and the ivy on the side of the house looked freshly disturbed. Officers feared the worst. An Amber Alert was issued before sunrise, and state police were called in to assist. Helicopters swept the area while search dogs combed the nearby woods. Neighbors woke to flashing lights and a swarm of investigators. Many stood in disbelief as news trickled out that Elliot Beaumont, the renowned surgeon, was dead and that his children were missing. Some refused to believe it. Others claimed they weren't surprised. By mid-afternoon, a breakthrough came. A young boy was spotted wandering barefoot through a Greyhound station 60 miles away. He looked confused and dazed. Security guards detained him and called police. It was Silas Beaumont. When officers questioned him, he barely spoke. He didn't know how he got there or how long he'd been gone. The only thing he repeated over and over, in a soft, cracked voice, was a single word: cellar. The word, cellar, echoed in the minds of investigators as they returned to the Beaumont residence, now sealed off by yellow crime scene tape and crawling with forensic teams. The home, once pristine and manicured, had become a place of unease. Something about it felt unnatural, too quiet, too curated. Every piece of furniture, every framed photograph, every scented candle seemed positioned with intent, not comfort. Detectives began their renewed search in the basement, a space that, up to this point, had only been briefly glanced at during the initial investigation. Now, with Silas's chilling clue, the team paid closer attention to every corner. The basement was dimly lit and sparsely furnished. Old holiday decorations, exercise equipment, and boxes of outdated electronics filled the shelves. It looked normal at first, but in the far corner, partially hidden behind a tall shelving unit stacked with plastic tubs labeled Christmas and winter clothes, one officer noticed something strange. The wall behind the shelves didn't match the rest of the foundation. It looked newer, cleaner, with a faint seam running vertically down the middle. After moving the shelving unit and knocking gently, it became clear it was a false wall. A hidden door, expertly constructed and painted to blend in. With permission from the district attorney's office, the team forced it open. What they discovered inside changed the entire scope of the investigation. The hidden room was small and cold, with soundproof foam lining the walls. A single metal framed bed sat in the center, bolted to the floor. Thick leather straps were attached at each corner. A plastic bucket rested in the corner near a vent. On the walls were small shelves holding outdated sedatives and syringes, along with several torn pages from school textbooks. A worn diary, its cover faded and scratched, was found under the mattress. The diary belonged to Lark Beaumont. Investigators began reading through the entries, and what they uncovered painted a terrifying picture. Lark had written extensively about being punished for things like missing a cue during a photo shoot, failing to maintain her posture in public, or speaking too freely around guests. She wrote about being drugged, locked in the basement, and told to reset her behavior. Each punishment, she claimed, was meant to cleanse the family image. What stood out most was the way she referred to her father. She never used the word dad or father. Instead, she called him the director. But one entry near the middle of the diary changed everything. Lark described a sister named Roan, someone no one had ever mentioned before. Roan, she wrote, had once lived with them and had been the first to disobey. She explained that Roan was older, 15 at the time of her disappearance, and that she had gone too far with the truth. Lark's entry hinted that Roan was kept in the same room, restrained for longer periods, and eventually stopped screaming. After a few days, she wasn't breathing anymore. Lark claimed her father made everyone agree that Roan had run away. Marina, their mother, staged a frantic call to the police, and an official missing person report was filed. But the case never gained traction, especially after Elliot reportedly pulled strings with colleagues to move the story along. Lark had continued writing about the guilt, about seeing Roan in her dreams, and about the quiet fury she felt building over the years. There were sketches in the margins of the diary, haunting childlike drawings of a girl behind bars, of a monster in a lab coat, of a mother with no mouth. Investigators ordered forensic analysis of the hidden room. Hair samples, blood traces, and pieces of fingernails were collected and submitted for testing. Within 48 hours, DNA results confirmed what they feared. The hair found in the straps and bedding belonged to Roan Beaumont. She had never run away. She had died in that room, and the family had buried the truth under layers of lies, image control, and silence. As this new evidence surfaced, The Beaumont case shifted from a single homicide to a possible pattern of abuse, imprisonment, and long-term psychological manipulation. The house had become more than a crime scene. It was now a mausoleum of secrets, and the truth was just beginning to rise from its shadows. 2 days after Silas was found at the bus station and the hidden room was uncovered, the search for Lark Beaumont intensified. Authorities suspected she had fled after her father's death, possibly to escape prosecution or simply to disappear. Search teams scoured nearby woods, rivers, and abandoned buildings. Helicopters hovered overhead. Missing posters were shared online, but with each passing hour, hope faded. On the third morning, a farmer discovered her body in a frost-covered orchard 15 miles from town. Lark was lying beneath a bare sycamore tree, her coat zipped up to the neck, her fingers curled into fists. There was no sign of trauma or assault. An empty pill bottle lay nearby. A letter, pinned to her jacket with a rusted safety pin, explained everything. It was handwritten in neat lines, with certain words underlined in red ink, as if she desperately needed them to be understood. In the letter, Lark admitted to killing Elliot. She said she had hit him with a fireplace poker, after a violent argument that began when she confronted him with a USB drive containing video footage from the hidden room. Footage, she claimed, that proved beyond any doubt how Roan had died. Lark had found the USB weeks earlier, hidden behind a loose panel in the study. She had watched it in silence, sickened by what she saw. She didn't describe the contents in detail, only saying that what he did to Roan can't be forgiven, can't be explained. After watching the footage, Lark had started to plan. Not revenge, exactly, more like justice. She had tried to tell Marina, but her mother refused to listen. Lark wrote that her mother chose silence over truth, valuing reputation above her children's pain. She described her home as a place of control, where love was a reward for obedience and disobedience meant punishment. Her father was not a caregiver, but a manipulator. He played them like actors in a scene he directed. The letter also revealed the depth of her emotional burden. Lark wrote about how the pressure to be perfect had crushed her slowly, like a hand tightening around her neck. The praise, the attention, the admiration from outsiders, it all felt like poison. It kept them trapped. She detailed how her father used his medical knowledge to experiment with behavioral drugs on her and Silas, masking it as therapy. She explained that the twins had spent much of their childhood under sedation, sometimes waking up with no memory of the previous day. On the night of the murder, she had reached her limit. Elliot had cornered her in the study, furious after discovering she had taken the USB drive. They argued. He accused her of betrayal. She claimed he reached for something on his desk, and in that moment, fearing she would end up like Roan, she picked up the poker and swung it as hard as she could. He collapsed instantly. Marina had witnessed everything. Instead of calling for help, she reportedly stared at Elliot's body and told Lark, "You just destroyed everything." That sentence became a recurring phrase in the letter. Lark wrote it 4 times, each with a growing sense of bitterness. She described how her mother tried to gather evidence and clean up the scene, while Lark and Silas escaped through the bedroom window. Silas, dazed and confused, ran alone into the night. Lark wandered until she found the orchard and decided it would be her final place. She wrote that she didn't want to live in a world that could reward people like her father and silence children like Roan. Her last lines were haunting. "Perfection was our curse. He built a world of mirrors, and I shattered every one." The discovery of the letter changed everything. It not only clarified the motive, but exposed the years of abuse, control, and silent suffering inside the Beaumont home. The murder wasn't random. It was a tragic eruption of truth long suppressed. Lark wasn't a runaway or a criminal. She was a survivor who simply couldn't carry the weight any longer. The town mourned her not just as a lost teen, but as a silenced voice finally heard. In the weeks that followed the discovery of Lark's body and her final letter, Willow Grove Hills transformed from a quiet, respectable neighborhood into a place haunted by collective guilt. News vans lined the streets. Journalists dug into every detail of the Beaumont family's history, piecing together the disturbing layers that had once been so carefully hidden. Headlines around the country painted the family as a facade of privilege masking a chamber of torment. And though the public was shocked, those who had lived closest to the Beaumonts began reflecting on what they had missed, or willfully ignored. Investigators used Lark's letter and the hidden footage from the recovered USB drive to build a complete timeline of abuse. The video files were as disturbing as she had described. They showed hours of footage documenting punishments, locked isolation, and sedative injections administered under the guise of discipline. In some clips, Elliot stood over his children with a cold clinical detachment, narrating their corrective sessions, as if recording medical trials. There was no trace of empathy, just control. Roan appeared in several early videos, often restrained or heavily sedated, her face gaunt and terrified. The last clip showing her was dated 7 years ago. After that, she vanished entirely from the footage, just as she had in life. Marina Beaumont, confronted with the evidence, finally broke her silence during an official interrogation. She confessed to knowing about Elliot's methods, but claimed she believed they were part of a therapeutic regimen. She insisted that she was manipulated too, convinced by Elliot's authority as a doctor and his obsession with protecting the family's image. But when asked why she didn't speak out, especially after Roan's disappearance, she faltered. Her answers became evasive, and eventually, she admitted that her silence had been a choice, a conscious trade security and status over truth. She was arrested and charged with child endangerment, obstruction of justice, and accessory to multiple felonies. Her trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. She received a 20-year sentence without the possibility of parole for the first decade. The courtroom was silent as the sentence was read. No tears, no pleas, just the sound of handcuffs closing around her wrists. Silas, the only surviving child, became a ward of the state temporarily while distant relatives from his mother's side petitioned for custody. He underwent extensive therapy and psychiatric evaluation. Experts said he showed signs of trauma-induced dissociation, a condition developed from prolonged emotional and psychological abuse. For weeks, he rarely spoke. He communicated in short phrases, often repeating things he remembered his sister saying. Eventually, he opened up. In a session with a psychologist, he said he remembered being told to smile during punishments, to pose for photographs right after being sedated, and to forget the bad things like Roan did. His memories, once buried under years of manipulation, were slowly returning. He told authorities he had vivid dreams of a red blanket, the one Roan used to wrap around herself before she disappeared. In one dream, he saw her wrapping it around Lark, as if to protect her. The Beaumont house remained untouched for months after the investigation concluded. Despite several offers from developers to buy the land, the local council decided the home would be demolished. The destruction took less than a day, but the emotional weight lingered. Neighbors gathered to watch the walls come down, some crying quietly, others watching with blank expressions. A few whispered prayers for the children. When the final beam collapsed, the crowd dispersed in silence. Years later, the story of the Beaumont family became a cautionary tale, taught in criminology courses and featured in true crime documentaries. People debated whether Elliot was a narcissistic abuser, a deluded perfectionist, or something far worse. But what everyone agreed on was that the image of the perfect family had hidden something deeply evil. The street where the house once stood now hosts a small community garden. A plaque at its center reads, "In memory of the ones who weren't heard in time, Roan, Lark, and every silenced child. Flowers bloom where secrets once grew." But the air in Willow Grove Hills never quite feels the same.